Hello, welcome to La Excellence. In our recap program, we are discussing monthly current affairs video. This is March 2021 related video. Let us discuss part 2 of it. PDF of this video is available in the description. If you want to write test series based on monthly current affairs videos, you can join the test series by clicking on the link mentioned in the description. First, let us start with society and social issues. Our first issue is Vishaka guidelines. Recently, Delhi High Court has acquitted former journalist Priya Ramani in a defamation case filed by former Union Minister. In this context, initially she has filed the case alleging sexual harassment at workplace. After that, he has filed a defamation case. In this context, let us understand the provisions related to sexual harassment at workplace. Vishaka guidelines formed basis for sexual harassment jurisprudence in India. Vishaka judgment of 1997. In this case, Supreme Court has laid down certain guidelines with regard to sexual harassment of women at workplace. And these guidelines include they defined what is the meaning of sexual harassment, and it has codified the preventive measures like formation of complaints committee. And under these guidelines, all employers, both in the private sector and public sector, should take appropriate steps to prevent the sexual harassment at workplace. And these guidelines are superseded by Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act 2013. Next issue is Medical Termination of Pregnancy Bill 2020. This bill has been approved by the Parliament. In this context, let us understand the provisions and the important points of the amendment. Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act 1971. This act deals with medical termination, that is abortion. In this context, there are certain new provisions that are added to the recent amended version. Let us understand that. Firstly, in the earlier Act, 1971 Act, in case of any contraceptive failure, abortion is allowed only for married women. Now it is applied to both married and unmarried women. Gestational age limit for abortion was 20 weeks earlier. Now it is for 24 weeks. Number of weeks for referral that has been increased. Fine of breach of women confidentiality that has been made stringent. In case of fetal abnormalities, earlier the limit was 20 weeks only. Now there is no limit at any point of time. Abortions can be done. But State Panel Medical Board should give the approval. Next, let us discuss international relations related current issues. First issue is bilateral investment treaty. Recently, Sri Lanka has terminated a tripartite agreement between India, Sri Lanka and Japan with regard to development of East Container Terminal in Colombo Port. In this context, now issue is raised with regard to bilateral investment treaty. And bilateral investment treaty as a concept is in use because of Vodafone and Crane issue also. So that let's understand what is the meaning of BIT, bilateral investment treaty. BITs are treaties between two countries. It protects the investment by imposing conditions on the behavior of both the countries. It imposes obligations on the host states to accord fair and equitable treatment, important word, fair and equitable treatment to the foreign investment and foreign investors. Second one, it allows for repatriation of profits subject to the conditions agreed between the two countries in the BIT. And it allows the individual investors to bring cases against the host states if it fails to comply with BIT, bilateral investment treaty. That is why Crane, Vodafone, these went to international arbitration as India has violated BIT. Yes, that's why judgments are in their favor because of BITs only. India has bilateral investment treaties with many countries. In 2016, we have announced model BIT policy. Thus, we are trying to reform and restructure the BITs that we already made with other countries. Next issue is INSTC and Chabahar Port. In our geography section of March 2021, we have discussed Chabahar Port, its location and its importance. Now let us discuss INSTC, what this project is and what are the objectives of this project. Let us understand. Recently in INSTC meeting, India has expressed its intent to include Chabahar Port as one of the top points of this INSTC. It's a 30-nation project, International North-South Transport Corridor. It extends from India to Russia. INSTC is a multimodal transport corridor. Multimodal means roadways, railways, portways, all that. And it was proposed in 2000 by Iran, Russia, and India, initially trilateral grouping. Now it has become a 13-nation project. It envisions 7,200 kilometers long multimodal network of ship, rail, and road route for transporting goods aimed at reducing the carriage cost between India and Russia by about 30%. And it also brings down the transit time from 40 days to 20 days. This corridor connects Indian Ocean region, Persian Gulf region, Caspian Sea region, important, Caspian Sea region. See, this is the route. Earlier, as of now, from St. Petersburg, Russia, if Russia wants to transport something to, let's say, India, Mumbai, first it has to go through Baltic Sea route, then Northern Sea route, North Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, and then into Arabian Sea. Now, this INSTC provides alternative route from here to Caspian Sea, then to Persian Gulf, and then to Arabian Sea. This is the shortest route. It reduces the distance by one half. Next issue is Quad Summit 2021, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue Summit. Earlier, Quad Foreign Ministers meeting happened, but this is the first time highest level participation is there. That means leader level participation is there. This is the first ever leadership summit of Quad grouping. It was held virtually. India, Japan, USA, Australia participated in this. Let us understand briefly about the genesis of Quad grouping. Immediately after 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, these four countries came together for coordinating relief operations in the Indian Ocean region. After that, for the first time in 2007, they met on the sidelines of ASEAN Summit. After that, many a times this discussion came up, but formally in the year 2017, this grouping took shape, but only in the recent few months this has assumed significance. So recently, first ever Quad Summit was held. They discussed the major objective of this grouping as maritime security and trade in the Indo-Pacific region, important. Indo-Pacific region. Next issue is UN Convention on Refugees. Recently, Home Ministry has directed border states of Myanmar, they are Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, to check illegal migration from Myanmar into India. In this context, it is said that India is not party of UN Convention on Refugees, so it doesn't have any obligation to invite them. So in this context, let us understand what is this UN Refugee Convention. It's a multilateral treaty that defines who is a refugee, and it sets out certain rights of the individuals who are granted the asylum in a country. It grants certain rights to people fleeing persecution because of race, religion, nationality, affiliation to a particular social group or political opinion. Please carefully observe economy. Economic factors are not part of it. Political and social factors, based on them, if someone comes, we call them as refugee. Otherwise, if it is only on economic condition, they are called as migrant. Right. This convention provides for visa-free travel for holders of travel documents issued under this convention. This particular convention has a primary principle known as principle of non-refoulement. Refoulement means sending them back to their country. Unless everything settles down, no host country can send back the refugees to their own place. That principle is known as principle of non-refoulement. But India is not party of UN Convention on Refugees. Next, let us discuss security related issues. First one is Cyber Volunteer Plan. Internet Freedom Foundation It's a digital liberties organization. This has written to Home Ministry saying that the recent proposed cyber volunteer plan can lead to culture of surveillance, constant suspicion in the society, and it can create the social distrust among the people. What is this cyber volunteer plan? See, in India, we to deal with cyber crimes, we have Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center. It has envisaged cybercrime volunteer program. It brings together the passionate individuals among the society to as a cyber volunteers. So recently it is proposed that around 500 people, these people who are volunteers, they flag the unlawful content on the internet. Based on this, law enforcement agencies they identify, they report, and they remove the illegal or unlawful online content. But they are advised to study Article 19 and the spirit of Article 19. But what is the criticism? What if these cyber volunteers, if they are biased against a group or a particular party or a particular region, can this lead to surveillance and constant suspicion in the society? Yes or no? So that is why this has been criticized. Cyber volunteer plan is part of Ministry of Home Affairs. Next issue is Red Echo and ShadowPad. ShadowPad is a malware, that means a software. Last year, that is in 2020, during LAC conflict, it was reported that ShadowPad malware was used against Indian power plants and power distribution companies. These form critical infrastructure. Yes or no? So, what if this critical infrastructure gets stalled or obstructed? That affects our national security. In this context, this ShadowPad, it is a backdoor Trojan malware. That means it opens a secret path from its target system to the command and control servers, and it sends the data, it controls the systems. This was first identified in 2017, but last year only it affected Indian systems. CERT-IN, it has detected ShadowPad malware and it reported to the national grid operator, so immediately they have taken the precautionary measures. There is a group called Red Echo, it is Chinese state controlled group. This group has launched, it is alleged that this group has launched this ShadowPad software during LAC conflict of last year. But please try to understand what happens if such critical infrastructure power distribution is very important, yes or no? Similarly, let's say nuclear program, space program, or let's say railways, if these systems are compromised, that affects the entire national security. That's why India needs better preparedness with regard to dealing with the cyber crimes. Let us briefly understand what this Computer Emergency Response Team is, CERTIN. It functions under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, not under Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Information Technology and Electronics. IT Amendment Act 2008, it has designated CERTIN as the national agency to perform the following functions. What are the functions of CERTIN? Collection, analysis, and dissemination of information related to cyber incidents, sending forecasts and alerts of cybersecurity incidents, emergency measures for handling cybersecurity incidents, coordination of cyber incident response activities, and other functions according to IT Act. That means CRT gets its powers through this IT Act 2008. Next issue is Kerala gold smuggling case. Recently, NIA has launched a probe against the gold smuggling. In this context, what we have to understand is money laundering. What do we mean by money laundering? It is a process by which large amounts that are illegally obtained is given the appearance of having originated from legitimate source. That means we send the money out of the country out to some place and then we bring back that money. This process is known as round tripping. Round tripping. We are taking the black money, bringing it as a white money. This is known as money laundering. Crimes such as illegal arms sale, terror financing, drug trafficking, etc. They produce huge money which is required to be laundered to look as clean money, that is white money. Money laundered, this is used for such crimes, and ED, NIA are investigating money laundering angle in this particular case. Next issue is Exercise Desert Flag 2021. For the first time, Indian Air Force is participating in the exercise Desert Flag 6. It is hosted by UAE Air Force. Exercise Desert Flag is an annual multinational large force employment warfare exercise. It is hosted by UAE. This is the first time India is participating. This particular exercise was held at Al Dhafra Air Base of UAE. Many countries are participating in this, including UAE, India, USA, France, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and Bahrain. First time India is participating in this. Next issue is BrahMos missile and export proposal to Philippines. Recently, India and Philippines they have signed the implementing agreement for procurement of defense material and equipment procurement. Under this agreement, it has laid down the proposal for export of BrahMos cruise missiles through government to government route. What is BrahMos missile? Let us understand. BrahMos is a joint venture project between India and Russia. We combinedly developed it. BrahMos signifies Brahmaputra and Moskova rivers. And it's a two-stage missile consisting of solid booster in the first stage, liquid ramjet engine in the second stage. BrahMos missile can be launched from land, air, and water, and it's a multi-capacity missile system. That means it can carry conventional warheads or nuclear warheads. This BrahMos missile system has provided nuclear triad to India. What do we mean by nuclear triad? Nuclear missiles can be launched from either water, land, and air. So this weapon system, this BrahMos system, earlier had the range of 290 kilometers. Now we increased to 400 kilometers. Now we are trying to increase it to 700 to 900 kilometers range. Next issue is Surya Kiran aerobatic team. Recently, Surya Kiran aerobatic team and Sarang helicopter display team, along with light combat aircraft LCA Tejas, they have performed an air show at a Galley Force in Colombo, Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is celebrating 70th anniversary of Sri Lankan Air Force. So in this context, this Surya Kiran aerobatic team has performed. The significance of this is the first time Surya Kiran aerobatic team has participated outside India since it was resurrected. Earlier, this team toured Sri Lanka during the 50th anniversary in 2001, but this is the first time it is performing in other country. Next issue is SIPRI report on defense. Stockholm Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, and according to this report, it provides annual report. According to this report, India's arms imports came down by 1/3 between as compared to 2011-15 to 16 and 20. And India is the third largest military expenditure by country. Third largest country. Earlier, Russia was the third largest military spender. Now, India became the third largest spender. Pakistan is ranked at 24th. And it is the first time two Asian countries have topped the top 3 list, China and India, both. Totally, $1,917 billion are spent on military. 38% of total global military spending is by the US. 62% of military expenditure by USA, China, India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, top 5 countries. Huge spenders. Next issue, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Recently, according to NCRB data, it is said that number of cases under this particular act are increasing, but the conviction rates are very low. In this context, let us understand what is this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Originally, it was enacted in the year 1967. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act was amended in 2004, 2008, recently in 2019. According to the amended version, definition of terrorism has been extended to individuals also. Earlier only organizations are designated as terror organizations, and individuals who are part of those organizations were declared as terrorists. Now, along with that, specific individuals can be identified as terrorists. And seizure of property under order of special court is allowed under the new recent amendment. Frequent application of UAPA with low conviction rate shows that there is misuse and use of UAPA. It is non-bailable. That means once the case is filed under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, it is non-bailable. Next, let us discuss economy-related issues. First one is Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme for MSMEs. As part of Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, in the last year, Emergency Credit Line Guarantee was announced for micro, small, medium enterprises. In this context, third version of it, Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme 3.0 was launched recently. That's why it's in news. 100% credit guarantee is provided under National Credit Guarantee Trust Company of Ministry of Finance. Banks and NBFCs, when they give loans, especially to small and other sectors, they always have the apprehension. That's why government is supporting the small marginal medium enterprises by providing affordable loans under Emergency Credit Guarantee Line Scheme. This provides more credit to the MSMEs, and the frequent functioning of MSMEs, they lead to economic revival. That is why Emergency Credit Line Guarantee Scheme was announced. Interest rates are levied, but there is a cap on levy of interest rate by banks and NBFCs. Next issue is need for revamped PDS. With regard to PDS, it is said that it has provided greater scope to maintain food security, especially during crisis situations like last year. Now there is a proposal for One Nation, One Ration card. According to that, there are many who advocate for comprehensive reform of PDS. In this context, let us understand what is PDS system and how it functions, how this PDS is implemented in the recent years. Right, first let us see. In PDS comes under Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. PDS is evolved as a system of management of scarcity to distribute the food grains and to promote affordable prices. Central government and state government both has the role in PDS. Central government through FCI procures, stores, transports the food grains. Operational responsibilities lies with the individual states. At the states the facilities, outlets, they sell the PDS food grain and others using issue price. Issue price is the price that we pay to the issuer. So in this context, we have to understand that wheat, rice and sugar, kerosene, these are supplied in all the states and union territories. Some of the states like AP, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, etc., they also supply some of the consumption products such as edible oils, pulses, salt, spices, etc. What is the importance of PDS? How it has played a role during last year's lockdown? Last year, you might have seen, apart from the regular PDS rations, central government, by bearing 100% cost, has provided free ration to the individuals having white ration cards. In this context, PDS scheme helps in building food and national security. It helps in stabilizing the food prices. It maintains the buffer stock. It helps the redistribution of grains from the more surplus areas to deficit areas. And system of minimum support price and procurement is based on PDS system. Our next issue is Prompt Corrective Action Framework. Recently, RBI has taken IDBI Bank out of Prompt Corrective Action Framework. So what is this PCA framework? Banks with weak financial metrics are identified by the RBI, and RBI maintains certain criteria to identify these banks. If any of these metrics are fulfilled by these banks, RBI imposes PCA restrictions on them. PCA framework was brought in the year 2002 as a structured early intervention mechanism for the banks. Initially, RBI assesses the quality of the assets and vulnerability of the banks due to loss of profitability. And it checks the NPA problem. And this framework was reviewed in the year 2017. PCA framework. This deems the bank as risky if they fails in capital to risk weighted asset ratio, net NPA ratio, return on assets, and tier 1 leverage ratio. Let us understand what they are. See, capital asset ratio. There are three thresholds. Based on these thresholds, restrictions vary. Tier 1 capital, net non performing asset ratio, negative return on assets. These are certain indicators. Some indicators, if the banks are in these thresholds, then PCA framework is invoked by the RBI. What are the restrictions then? There are two types of restrictions. First one is mandatory restrictions, second one is discretionary restrictions. Restrictions on dividend, branch expansion, directors' compensation are mandatory, while discretionary restrictions include curbs on lending and deposition. On whose discretion these curbs are imposed? RBI's discretion. RBI, based on the situation of the bank, it imposes these restrictions under PCA framework. Next issue is fuels exempted under GST. Petroleum products, petroleum crude, high speed diesel, natural gas, petrol, aviation turbine fuel, these are exempted from GST. That means separate rates are imposed on them. They are not part of GST as of now. And if we want to bring in this under GST framework, who should decide that? It's the GST Council. Under Article 279A, it's a constitutional body and it recommends the union and state governments on issues related to goods and services tax. And it was introduced by 101 Constitutional Amendment Act 2016. GST Council is headed by Union Finance Minister and other members include Union State Minister of Revenue or Finance and ministers, finance ministers in charge of states and union territories. It is considered as one of the cooperative federal structures. 3/4 of the voting should be there to pass any resolutions in GST Council. Central government has 1/3 voting weightage. State governments have 2/3 voting weightage. Totally, if a decision has to pass, 3/4 weightage is required. Next issue is draft national e-commerce policy. E-commerce sector is important. It comes under Ministry of Commerce, DPIIT, Department of Industry, Investment and Trade. This is the nodal agency that deals with e-commerce and related policy. According to this draft national e-commerce policy, large e-commerce firms should phase out the discounts within 2 years. That is known as differential pricing strategies. They need a sunset clause. E-commerce companies have to store consumer data within India. Competition Commission of India have to amend the current threshold by studying the competition distorting structures of mergers and acquisitions of the e-commerce companies. 49% of FDI is allowed in the inventory model. Independent e-commerce regulator will deal with the consumer complaints and compliances related to FDI caps. Tax incentives are provided for e-commerce companies for data localization and infrastructure is provided for data centers. So if infrastructure status is provided for data centers, they'll be given concessional loans. That is why. Next issue is development finance institutions. Union Cabinet has cleared Development Financial Institution Bill, and under this DFI, the bank would be named as National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, NABFID. So this will be a government-owned institution with 20,000 crore rupees as the paid-up capital. By setting up, government wants to leverage around $3 trillion from the market by issuing the long-term infrastructural bonds. It issues long-term infrastructural bonds. It gathers money. Through that, it invests in the infrastructural projects. Normal banks, they have limitations. They cannot lend loans for a longer period. But infrastructural projects, they have long gestation periods such as 15 years, 20 years. So to deal with the credit issues in infrastructural sectors, DFI, which is called as National Bank for Financing Infrastructure and Development, this has been constituted. Please understand, DFIs are not new in India. There are many developmental financial institutions such as IIFCL, IDBI, etc. And this has been set up latest for infrastructural projects. Government gives 5,000 crore as a grant to the institution. Slowly, as of now, it is going to be 100% government owned institution. Slowly, promoters' stake, government's stake will be brought down to 26%, and domestic and foreign institutions will be given 74% of the stake. Government will provide 10-year tax exemption to the funds invested in DFI to attract the long-term players such as insurance and pension funds in investing in DFIs. This helps in building the infrastructural projects. We have national investment pipeline for that. Funding can be provided through this institution. Next issue is increase in FDI in insurance sector. Recently, Cabinet has approved a proposal to amend the Insurance Act 1938. Under this, FDI limit in insurance sector is increased from 49% to 74%. This increase has been criticized, but government said there are safeguards. That is, one, majority of the directors of the board of these insurance companies should be Indians, resident Indians, and government will also specify the particular percentage of profits that it has to retain as a general reserve in India. See, when FDI is there, they may carry the entire profit to their country. That is not of use to us. That is why others criticized government said there are safeguards. What is the significance of this move allowing FDI in insurance? One, it improves the capital availability in the insurance sector. It develops the insurance industry, channelizes the funds. It increases the competition in the sector. It benefits the small insurance players, and it improves the insurance penetration in the country. Insurance penetration means development of insurance sector in the country. Currently, insurance penetration is just 3.71%. To enhance this penetration, this can help. Next issue is LIC IPO. IPO means initial public offering. When a company lists in the share market for the first time, and when it sells its stakes or stocks for the first time, it is called as initial public offering. And IPO, this LIC's IPO is expected to be the biggest in Indian capital markets. Given the size of LIC, it has total asset size of 31 lakh crores. Government is seeking some exemptions related to LIC IPO. Generally, IPO is done in only one phase, but government is asking for LIC IPO in two phases. In this context, in the year budget 2020, government has announced the plans for IPO of LIC. LIC has major stake in IDBI Bank. Now, government wants to privatize the IDBI Bank. This is expected to add liquidity in the market. Government is going to raise 90,000 crore rupees through stake sale in LIC and IDBI Bank, and other 1.2 lakh crore through other disinvestments. In the year 2017, government has listed the shares of General Insurance Corporation, New India Assurance through IPOs, and this year it is planning to list the LIC through IPO. Next issue is ULPIN database. ULPIN means Unique Land Parcel Identification Number. In the year 2008, government has initiated Land Records Digitization Program. Land Record Digitization Program. Under this, land records are digitized and they will be maintained in a uniform format. Now, government is planning to allocate unique number like Aadhaar number. How we have Aadhaar number, similarly, each land parcel will be identified with a number. These unique IDs are based on georeferencing coordinates of the land parcel based on international standards. And it would comply with the Electronic Commerce Code Management Association standards and Open Geospatial Consortium standards. This unique number will have 14-digit alphanumeric ID. It will provide compatibility so that all states can have similar database. It will be rolled out from next year. Proper land statistics and land accounting through ULPIN will develop the land market in India. This ensures uniqueness in all the transactions, and it links the property transactions can be established. Delivery of citizen services related to land holdings, let's say PM Kisan, or sale and purchase of land, or land acquisition, All can be done with less conflict through single window system. National Generic Documentation Registration System NGDRS. This system functions under Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. It aims to provide for one software, one nation registration of documents. The benefits of National Generic Document Registration System include reduction of land disputes, check on fraudulent transactions, reduced process complexity, time of documentation registration, etc. They come down. ULPIN, this will be part of this particular software, which will be included into Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. Next issue is USD coin. USD coin is a cryptocurrency. Visa company is allowing the direct acceptance of payments in USD coins for new connections, and it establishes new connections between digital and traditional currencies. Let's say if we have to pay amount, we need not pay in dollars, we can pay in cryptocurrency. That means instead of cryptocurrency, fiat currency means the government's currency, we can deposit the cryptocurrency. And USD coin is considered as the stable coin cryptocurrency because its value is pegged to US dollar. Now, the major issue with cryptocurrencies is they are highly volatile. But USD coin, it allows it is stable as compared to other coins because it is linked to USA's dollar. And Visa, this company has partnered with Digital Asset Bank Anchorage and completed the first transaction of the month. And it has sent USDC to Visa's Ethereum address at Anchorage. Ethereum is a cryptocurrency. USD coin is a stable cryptocurrency. Next issue is World Development Report 2021. Recently, World Bank has published World Development Report 2021. The theme of it is Data for Better Lives. This particular report highlights the need of data, evidence-based policy making, safety and privacy of data, data localization issues, etc. World Development Report is published annually by World Bank. It provides blueprint on how to harness the power of data for development and to ensure no one is left behind, that is, to ensure social contract for inclusive growth. Next issue is International Year of Millets. Recently, UNGA has adopted a resolution declaring 2023 as the International Year of Millets. This resolution has been adopted with the consensus and support of 70 nations. The objective of this is to promote the awareness and directing the policy attention towards the millets. And it is moved forward by India and other countries supported it. India is one of the largest millet producer in the world. Millets are the oldest foods. These are small seeded hardy crops which can grow well in the dry zones, rain-fed areas. They can grow in the marginal conditions of soil fertility and less soil moisture. Millets are cultivated in low fertile land, and now climate change is posing a huge challenge. In this context, millet cultivation reduces the food insecurities. It promotes the nutritional diversity. In India, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, AP, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Telangana are famous for millet cultivation. These are rain-fed areas. Major millets commonly found in India include jowar, bajra, ragi, jangora, barri, kangri, kodra. These are some of the major millets that are famous in India. Next issue is capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is in news because of Crane and Vodafone issues. Now, in this context, let us understand what this capital gains tax is. Any profit or gain that arises from the sale of a capital asset is known as capital gain. This gain, which can also be called as profit, that comes under the category of income. So, on the income, individuals and companies need to pay the tax, right? So, capital gains tax will be required to be paid for the amount in the year in which the transfer of capital asset has taken place. This tax is known as capital gains tax. This can be divided into short-term and long-term capital gains tax. Remember, capital gains tax is not applicable to inherited property because, let's say, from a father to daughter, if an inherited property comes, there is no sale in that. So, only transfer of land ownership, no sale of land. That is why capital gains is not applicable in that context. Land, building, house, property, vehicles, patents, trademarks, leasehold rights, machinery, jewelry. These are some of the examples, and shares. These are some of the examples of capital assets. When these are sold, when there is profit, on them tax need to be paid. Such tax is known as capital gains tax. As we said, there are two types of taxes: long term capital gains tax, short term capital gains tax. Both are there. They are levied based on the profits. Capital gains can be reduced by deducting the capital losses that occur when a taxable asset is sold for less than the original price. If it is sold at the less than the original purchase price, we can deduct the capital gains tax. And that's why we can calculate the net capital gains and then we can pay the tax. Tax on capital gains is triggered only when the asset is sold. Let's say if we have stock of shares and if we get profit and we are not selling it, then we need not pay. When we sell them only we have to pay the tax, capital gains tax. As Vodafone and Crane India, they have sold these shares, transferred the shares to other company. That means that's a capital gains. That's why capital gains tax is introduced retrospectively in the year 2012. That is the issue. Why you introduced it retrospectively. With that, they went to arbitration courts. Next issue is government's bond yield. Recently, RBI's decision to set up the purchase of government securities under Government Securities Acquisition Program (GSAP) program has led to yield on benchmark 10-year bond to fall below 6%. In India, interest rates by the banks are decided based on the yield of 10-year government securities. It is considered as the benchmark rate. What is the meaning of bond yield? Bond yield is the return an investor realizes on the bond. Mathematically, if we calculate, yield is equal to annual coupon rate. That means the face value of the bond, let's say the bond's coupon value is 100 rupees, and that is divided by current market price of the bond. Let's say current market price is 90 rupees. Then yield would be more. Otherwise, let's say coupon rate is 100 but current market price is 110 rupees. Then yield will be less. Yes or no? So based on the yield value, we say bond yield has increased or reduced. Bond is a debt instrument to borrow the money. A bond could be issued by a country's government or by a company. If it is issued by a company, we call it as corporate bond. If it is issued by the government, we call them as government securities. Coupon rate means the rate of interest paid by the bond issuer on the bond's face value is known as coupon price. And what is the effect of bond yields? Movement of yields depends upon the trends in interest rate. So that can result in capital gains or losses for the investors. So raise in the bond yield in the market, it will bring the price of the bond down. Drop in the bond yield, it would benefit the investor as the price of bond would rise. Understand bond yield and the price of the bond, how they move. Please understand the correlation. Next issue is BRICS Contingency Reserve Agreement. So as we are discussing March 2021 issues, in March it was in news that India is going to hold the BRICS summit this year. That is why it was in news. BRICS is acronym for the grouping of world's leading emerging economies known as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. It was proposed by Jim O'Neill in 2001. In 2006, our foreign ministers met. In 2010, our South Africa was added as a part. And this year, India is the chairman of this group. BRICS Contingency Reserve Agreement, it was proposed in Fortaleza Declaration at the 6th BRICS Summit. And during this time, two institutions were established. One is BRICS Contingency Reserve Agreement. Two is New Development Bank. New Development Bank is similar to World Bank. It funds for the developmental projects. BRICS Contingency Reserve Agreement. This is similar to IMF. It provides money during the BOP crisis. It provides for currency swaps during the BOP crisis situation. Initial resources is $100 billion. This would contribute to the strengthening the global safety nets in case of any financial BOP crisis. Next issue is state level quota for the local employment in various states. Many states including Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, AP, Chhattisgarh, they have proposed for quota for the locals in the employment. But if we observe census 2011, according to 2001, 33 million or 8.1% of workforce are migrants for the economic reasons. According to census 2011, total workforce is 482 million, and that is to cross 500 million by 2016. So in this context, 20% of the workforce will be migrants. In this context, having such policies is against the sustainable migrant policy. Migrants, they help in the development of the country. Migrants, they help in the development of the economy of the state. So having discriminatory policies, such policies are against right to equality, right to freedom of trade, Article 15 and 16. But they are not implemented, they cannot be implemented properly because of the economic gains that the migrants bring in. Our final issue is NPCI, National Payments Corporation of India. NPCI is an umbrella organization for operating retail payments and settlement system in India. For retail payments, not for bulk payments. It's an initiative under RBI and Indian Banks Association under the provisions of Payment and Settlement System Act 2007. It is for creating robust payment and settlement infrastructure in India. NPCI is incorporated as a not-for-profit company under Companies Act 1956. Now it is called as Companies Act 2013. It is constituted with an intention to provide infrastructure for the entire banking system in India for physical as well as electronic payment and settlement system. NPCI holds certain products known as UPI, RuPay, BHIM, NACH, IMPS, NETC, Bharat Bill Payment System, Check Truncation System, NFS, Aadhaar Enabled Payment System. These are all the portfolios entities under NPCI, and revenues from these operations is increasing steadily. These are the issues of March 2021 Part 2. All the very best. Thank you very much.